Josh Hurley was on his way home from Seattle after wrapping up a successful negotiation that would significantly improve the cash flow for the software company he worked for. On top of that, he had the opportunity to see his younger sister, Lisa, who had come up from Tacoma, where she attended the University of Washington. They had a good dinner at the Hilton Garden Inn and spent a couple of hours catching up. It had been a few years since he had seen her, and he enjoyed the time they spent together. Now, he was looking forward to seeing Donna, his wife of nearly 5 years. He hated being away from her, but unfortunately, that was just the nature of his job. What he was really looking forward to was their 5-year wedding anniversary, which was on Friday, the day after tomorrow. Unknown to her, he had already made a reservation at a local resort hotel for the weekend and had ordered a blue sapphire sunburst necklace he intended to give her at the hotel. His plan was to pick it up from the jewelry shop the next afternoon. Right now, though, he wondered where she could be. He called her cell phone before he boarded the flight, but it went straight to voicemail. He also tried calling the house, but that too went to voicemail. Perhaps she's just out shopping with one of her friends, he thought. He thought about Donna and how much he missed her. Standing at just under 5.5 feet, she had long, wavy dark hair, hazel eyes, and a dark complexion that looked like a permanent suntan. She was a terrific lover. The only complaint he had was her insane jealousy. She was normally one of the sweetest women he had ever known, but he hated it when she made her false accusations. He loved her too much to ever cheat on her, and went out of his way to make sure she realized that. Still, it had gotten so bad that he couldn't even have a business meeting with a female colleague without Donna thinking they were having an affair. He thought he had finally nipped it in the bud when he challenged her to hire a private investigator and have him watched. Maybe, he thought, once she had proof of his fidelity, she would back off and realize her fears were unfounded. He was getting more than a little fed up with her jealousy and false accusations. It's not that he didn't have secrets from her. He did, and her constant harping on his so-called infidelity threatened to bring one of those secrets to light, in a very ugly way. He felt his heart rate increase as he thought about her constant harping on the subject. He took a few deep breaths as he had been taught, but to no avail. He felt his face start to burn and knew he had to get himself under control, quickly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small packet of pills. He took one and began to relax after a few minutes, his heartbeat returning to normal. The man sitting next to him eyed him with concern. "Are you okay, sir?" the man asked. "Do you want me to call for someone?" John shook his head. "No, but thanks for asking. It's just an old heart condition. I've got medication for it." The man nodded his head and sat back, but kept an eye on John, just in case. Finally, the plane landed. John grabbed his luggage and went to his car, sitting in the short-term parking lot. He tried calling Donna again, but got her voicemail. He got the same response when he called the house. Where the hell was she? He asked himself. He started the car and drove home. When he finally pulled into his garage, he noticed Donna's car was gone. He thought it odd that she wouldn't be home since it was about 6:30 p.m. Normally, she was home from work by 5:30 or so. Maybe she had decided to go out with some of her friends from work for a drink, he thought. It didn't happen often, and he never begrudged her that bit of time to blow off steam. But she would generally call or text him to let him know in advance. Moreover, she knew he would be coming home today. Usually, she would be home so they could reconnect when he returned from a trip. He grabbed his things and trudged into the dark house. He put his things away and headed downstairs to see if Donna had left a note. He found nothing and made himself a cup of coffee. This was strange, he thought. She always let him know when she would be out for a bit, so why was there no note? He pondered this as he sipped on his coffee. Suddenly, his phone rang. He saw it was from Donna, so he answered. "Donna? Where are you?" "I'm sorry, John. I was getting ready for tonight and I didn't realize you had called until just a few minutes ago." "What were you getting ready for?" John asked. "It's a little surprise. Some friends and I wanted to surprise you when you got home tonight. Why don't you come on over so we can celebrate?" "Sure. Where are you?" She gave him an address and he wrote it down. "What is this anyway? Is it a club or a restaurant or something?" John asked. "An old friend of mine has a private club at his house, and we decided to put something together for you. Kinda like a combination welcome home and anniversary party." "That sounds like fun," John said. Donna laughed at that. "Yes, I promise it'll be a lot of fun. Wear something casual, okay?" "Okay. I'll see you soon," John answered. "See ya, babe," she said before ending the call. Strange, he thought. She didn't tell him she loved him, yet this was supposed to be a surprise anniversary party of some sort. Still, there was something about the way she spoke that made him wonder what was going on. He went upstairs, showered, shaved, and dressed in blue jeans and a polo shirt. He looked the address up on MapQuest and saw that it was in a fairly rough area of town. Who did she know that lived out there, he wondered. He knew most of the people in the insurance office where she worked and didn't think any of them lived out there. So who was this friend? He knew she once ran with a group of fairly rough types when she was younger, but thought she had outgrown them. He locked up, got in his car, and punched the address in his Garmin Smart Drive. He backed out and followed the GPS device to the address, but he was a bit shocked when he reached the destination. A medium-sized house sat in the middle of a lot that was surrounded by a chain-link fence. He noticed the pickups and motorcycles parked around the place and started to get a bit concerned since he didn't recognize any of the vehicles. He pulled in, parked, and went to the front door. A large man wearing a t-shirt and jeans opened when he knocked on the door. John noticed the beer in his hand and heard rock music coming from inside. "Yeah?" the man asked. "I'm John Hurley, and my wife Donna asked me to meet her here. I hope I have the right address." The man smiled, but John wasn't convinced it was out of genuine friendship. The man reached up and shook John's hand. "You must be Donna's old man. You can call me T-Bone. We've been expecting you. Come on in." John walked in and looked around to see several other large men in the front room. "Hey, everyone. The man of the hour is finally here," T-Bone said. The other men nodded and smiled at John. They may have been smiling, but John didn't feel any real friendship here. "Where's Donna?" John asked. "Oh, she's downstairs getting ready for the main event," T-Bone said, causing the others to chuckle. "Want a beer?" "Yeah, sure," John said. One of the others handed John a bottle of cold beer. "Thanks," John said. He opened it and took a tentative sip. "So what is this main event?" he asked T-Bone. "That's the surprise. Your old lady wanted to do something special for your anniversary and asked us to help her out." "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," John said. "Who are you guys?" "Well, that over there is CJ," T-Bone said, pointing at one of the men in the room. "Over there is RJ, and that guy standing next to him is AJ. That big feller back there, we call him Bull. I'm sure you can understand why." John saw the very large, muscular black man standing by the kitchen table. All of them looked to be mean as snakes, and John saw the large knife sheathed in a scabbard on RJ's hip. "Yeah, and you're all Donna's friends?" John asked. "Yep, have been for a while. Haven't seen her much since she married you, though." "She never mentioned any of you to me before," John said. "I'm not surprised. Most people try to avoid us as much as they can." "And you have a private club here?" John asked. "Yeah, down in the basement. Built it ourselves. We like to get together from time to time, have a few drinks, bring in some entertainment, you know." The others chuckled at that, but John's hackles were raised. Something bad was about to happen, but he didn't know what. John heard footsteps coming up from the basement. "She's ready," a sixth man said as he walked into the front room. "Is this her old man?" "Yeah, John, this here's Jake. He'll escort you down." "What's going to happen?" John asked. "A little surprise. I promise it'll be an evening you won't forget." The others chuckled, but John was nervous. "It'll be all right," Jake said. "Come on, Donna's waiting for you." John walked over to Jake, who led him downstairs. "Happy anniversary," T-Bone said as John began his descent. When he got downstairs, he saw a small bar in one corner of the basement and a well-lit raised area that occupied one end of the room. A curtain was hung across the end of the area, which he realized was probably a stage. What concerned him the most was the bed in the middle of the stage and the camera mounted on a tripod a few feet back. There were several neon beer signs hanging on the walls, and the room was fairly dark, like a bar or a club. A pool table was placed at the opposite end of the basement, and John saw a few tables in the room. A jukebox occupied one area of the wall, and John realized that was the source of the music. Two other men stood in the room and watched John as he entered. Jake led him to a chair that sat in front of the stage. The chair sat next to a table but faced the stage. "Have a seat," Jake said, pointing to the chair. "Where's Donna?" John asked. "She'll be out shortly. Go on, sit down. You can put your beer on the table if you want." John set the beer down and looked around. Something inside told John he needed to get the hell out of there, but he suspected the 5 men upstairs were not about to let him go. Plus, he was worried about Donna. What would they do to her if he ran out? He took one last sip and placed his bottle on the table. The moment he sat in the chair, Jake and the other 2 men quickly grabbed his arms and zip-tied them to the arms. "What the hell is going on?" John asked, getting angry. The men ignored him and zip-tied his ankles to the legs of the chair. "Get me out of here right now," John demanded. "Shut up, jerk," he heard his wife say. He looked up and saw Donna half naked. "What the hell is this? Why are you dressed like that? Who are these guys?" John demanded. "This is to celebrate our anniversary. These guys are my friends, and they're going to help me teach you a lesson about cheating." She threw a picture on his lap, and he looked. It was a photo someone had taken of him eating dinner with his sister. "I've never cheated on you. You've got this all wrong," John shouted. "Nonsense!" she screamed. Suddenly, John saw stars as one of the men who tied him to the chair hit him in the face. John shook his head and closed his eyes. "Stop it," Donna told the man, who backed off. "I'll be the one who teaches him his lesson." She turned back to her husband. "Donna, stop this right now, and we can discuss this." "It's not what it looks like," John answered. "Oh, really? It looks to me like you're enjoying yourself with that blonde floozy. So if you can enjoy yourself, so can I. But unlike you, I'm not going to keep it a secret." With that, she turned away and stepped on the stage. "Okay, boys, it's showtime." John tried to object, but one of the men put a ball gag in his mouth, preventing him from saying anything. He tried to fight the man, but was unsuccessful. By now, all the others had made their way downstairs. T-Bone stood next to him and whispered in his ear. "Nothing personal, but Donna's an old friend, so we decided to help her teach you a lesson. Now sit and enjoy the show. Don't try to be a hero. Once she's done, we'll let you go. Maybe she'll go with you, but that's up to her." John tried to say something, but the gag in his mouth prevented it. "Just relax. Take your medicine like a man." He stood back up and nodded at CJ, who stood by the jukebox. CJ pressed a button and a song began playing. As the music began, Donna started dancing and performing for them. "You like this, lover boy?" she sneered at John. "Did your little blonde cheating woman do this for you? Huh?" She danced a bit more. "I really hope you like this, lover boy, because you're never going to touch me ever again. Come here, boys, and show little Johnny how a real man performs." She laughed as all the men, except for RJ, surrounded her. John shook his head and tried screaming, "No!" through the gag. He noticed that RJ stood by John's chair, his arms across his chest. He was obviously there to keep John under control. Donna stood up and led the men to the bed on the stage. She sat on the bed and looked at John. "This will teach you to cheat on me, you bastard," she growled. She lay down on the bed and 2 of the men stood by her head as T-Bone positioned himself for the deed. John, however, wasn't turned on by the action taking place on the stage, just the opposite. He tried to control himself with the breathing exercises he had been taught in his martial arts training, but felt the rage beginning to build up inside him. She was right about one thing. He would never touch her again. He thought the degradation was over when he saw Donna get up on her knees, but he was wrong. She looked at him and laughed. "Don't worry, honey. We're just getting warmed up, aren't we, boys?" The men laughed at that. John looked up at RJ, who was smiling as he watched the show. John wondered why he wasn't participating. RJ looked down at him, frowned, and took John's head in his hands. "Watch them, not me," he growled as he forced John to look at the stage. John felt the rage continuing to build inside him. "Just so you know, I'll probably get pregnant tonight," she said with a smirk. "I've been off my pills for the last few weeks. Don't worry, I use a diaphragm whenever you have been with me, so you don't have to worry about it being yours. But you will raise this child as yours." John shook his head, his anger blurring his vision. "You're probably wondering why RJ hasn't been with me, aren't you?" she asked. John nodded his head. "You see, RJ is gay. He prefers boys over girls. And after tonight, you will too." They all laughed as John felt his face get red hot. For the second time in his entire life, John snapped. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the middle of a pile of bodies on the floor. RJ was screaming in pain, his left hand pinned to the table by a knife buried to the hilt. He felt the pain in his arms and legs and saw blood dripping from where the zip ties had secured him to the chair. Looking up, he saw Donna, wide-eyed and trembling. "Please don't hurt me," she begged. "I'm not going to hurt you," John said, shaking his head. Keeping his eye on her, John pulled his phone out of his pants pocket and dialed 911. When he finished, he put his phone away and looked at her. "You stupid cheating woman," he growled. "John, I've got you dead to rights. You cheated on me with that blonde cheating woman. I was just getting even with you." "So you got a private investigator to follow me in Seattle, is that right?" he asked. "Yes, and I got that photo." "Did you bother to read the report that came with it?" John asked. She shook her head. "No, all I did was look at the photo," she replied. "That was my sister, you ignorant woman. The last time we saw her was at our wedding. She's a senior at the University of Washington. She came up to visit me in Seattle and we had dinner. That's all, just dinner. So you saw the picture and didn't even ask me about it. You just made an assumption, like you always do. Well, guess what, you stupid woman? You're right about one thing. I'm never touching you again. I'll see you in jail and then I'm divorcing you. We're finished." "No, John, please don't do that," she begged, walking toward him. "Stay away from me," John said. "John, please, I made a mistake, that's all." "Yeah, you made a mistake, all right, and you're going to pay for that mistake big time." By then, the police had arrived and several officers came downstairs after breaking the front door down. They each had their guns drawn and looked around at the carnage. They quickly moved through the basement, checking each of the men. One officer pulled the knife out of RJ's hand and watched as he slumped to the floor. A sergeant approached John. "Did you do all this?" he asked. Shaking, John nodded his head. "Why?" the sergeant asked. "Look at the video and you'll know why," John said, pointing at the camera. "Check out that video," the sergeant told one of the officers. The officer looked at the video briefly and motioned for the sergeant. After quickly scanning the video, the sergeant came back to John. "Okay, it looks like self-defense on your part, but I'll need a full statement and you need to get checked out." By then, ambulances arrived and paramedics began taking the men upstairs on gurneys. A plainclothes detective arrived and was looking around the room, talking to the officers. After looking through the video, he came over to the sergeant and John. "I'm Detective Jones. You must be Mr. Hurley," the detective said. "Yes, that's me," John said. "I've briefly looked at the video. I agree with Sergeant Smith here. It appears you acted out of self-defense. Tell me what happened." John recalled the events of the last few hours. The detective took notes as John spoke. "How did you manage to break out of that chair?" And how were you able to take all these men down? They all appear to be much bigger than you. I have a medical condition. I've had it since I was a kid. There's a name for it, but I can't pronounce it. The bottom line is that under certain conditions, my adrenaline levels go through the roof and I basically lose it, for lack of a better term. I have a prescription that helps me keep it under control, and my marital arts training also helps me keep my cool. This is only the second time in my life something like this has ever happened. Do you have that medication with you? Jones asked. John nodded his head. I keep it with me at all times. I only take it when it's needed, which fortunately isn't very often. Jones asked one of the other officers to bring a bottle of water, which he did. Maybe you should take one now, Jones said, handing John the water. John pulled the small packet out of his pocket and swallowed a pill with the water Jones had given him. A few seconds later, John felt much better. Are you okay now? Jones asked. Yes, thanks, John said. Do you remember what you did here? Jones asked. No, I don't, John said, shaking his head. Jones showed John the video. He was shocked at what he saw. It was like watching a Steven Seagal movie, only this was real life. He saw himself roar, then break out of the chair. In the video, he grabbed RJ's knife out of its scabbard and plunged it into the bigger man's left hand, pinning it to the table. The other men came after him as Donna sat, scared. In less than a minute, John had taken all of the other men down. You don't remember doing any of this? Jones asked. No, I don't. Honestly, I never thought I even had it in me to do something like this. What's the last thing you remember? Jones asked. That man getting ready to stick his in my mouth, John said. You're saying he was going to force you to perform video? Jones asked. John nodded his head, tears falling down his face. Yes, he was going to rape me, and my wife was in on it. I see, Jones said, looking across the room, where another officer was taking Donna's statement. By then, the officers had covered her body with a blanket. I want you to go to the hospital and get checked out, Mr. Hurley. I'll speak with you a bit more after I've had a chance to collect all the evidence. I take it you'll be wanting to press charges. Absolutely, John said. What about your wife? Do you want to press charges on her as well? Especially against her. She's the instigator of all this, John answered. Very well, Jones said. He took John's contact information as a paramedic checked out his wrists and ankles. I'll be in touch, Mr. Hurley. I'd appreciate it if you didn't leave town. I'm not going anywhere, John said. Detective Jones nodded his head and gave instructions to the officers and went to see Donna, who was still being questioned by an officer. A couple of minutes later, John heard her wail as she was cuffed and led out of the room. Please, John, don't let them take me away. Please tell them it was all a big misunderstanding. John shook his head and looked the other way. After everyone was finished with the questioning, John drove to the hospital to get checked out. A few hours later, he drove home, his cuts dressed, cleaned, and bandaged. On the way, he realized he hadn't eaten since he left Seattle and went through a drive-thru for a burger. Once home, he ate, then called his boss, Jim Rollins, to explain the situation. Damn, John, I'm sorry to hear that. Look, why don't you bring the signed contract in and then take the next week off? You've got plenty of vacation time coming. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that, John said. After he calmed down, John showered and went to bed. The next day, he went to the jewelry shop and canceled the order for Donna's necklace. He ended up paying a small restocking fee but got most of his money back. He also canceled the hotel reservation and had the charges reversed. He then called around and set an appointment to see Jenny Hawkins, attorney at law, about a divorce on Friday. He just finished eating lunch when his phone rang. He looked and saw it was Donna's parents. He took a deep breath and answered. Hello, he said. John, what the hell is going on? Asked Marcia, his mother-in-law. Donna called from the county jail. She said she's been arrested and they're holding her without bail. Did you do something? John couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. He counted to 10 and took a few deep breaths before answering. Did she tell you why she was arrested? John asked. She said it was all some kind of misunderstanding on your part, Marcia said. Really? You mean she didn't tell you that she plotted to have me tied up? Forced me to watch her have intimacy with multiple men? Didn't she tell you about that? What? Why would she do such a thing? Marcia asked. Because she saw a picture of me having dinner with my little sister and thought I was having an affair. The woman is nuts. And tomorrow, I'm seeing an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. You can't be serious. Look, I know you're probably upset, but surely you can understand how she would feel. What would you do if you saw a picture of her eating lunch with a man? I would ask her about it, John said. I wouldn't fly off the handle the way she did. Look, Marcia, you have no idea what your daughter did, and there's no way in hell I can overlook it. I've been dealing with her insane jealousy since we got married. I'm tired of it. It ends now. With that, he ended the call. When she called back, he sent the call straight to voicemail. Curious, he went into the second bedroom, where he and Donna had their home computers set up. He sat down at her computer and fired it up. He already knew her passwords, so he got into her desktop easily. He opened her email client and was shocked at what he saw. He found an email from something called Jenkins Investigations and opened it up. Attached to the email was a document and a photo. The photo was of him and his sister eating dinner, the same one she threw in his face earlier. The report stated that target John Hurley, meaning him, had eaten dinner with what appeared to be a much younger woman. The report went on to say that after dinner, the woman left the hotel and Hurley went to his room. There was more. The report clearly stated that the woman was Lisa Hurley, a senior attending the University of Washington, and according to public records, was John's youngest sister. At no time was Hurley with a woman for the purposes of illicit intimacy, and at no time during our observation did Hurley ever engage in any inappropriate behavior with anyone, male or female, the report concluded. If Donna had bothered to read the report, she would have known he was innocent of cheating on her. But as usual, she simply saw the photo and came to her own false conclusion. He printed that out and kept digging. He saw emails from her to something called the Dash website, in which she falsely claimed that her husband was cheating on her and she wanted revenge. He saw emails from the site and read the thread that followed. As he read, he felt his blood pressure begin to rise. What happened to him last night was carefully scripted, and he realized she intentionally planned to have him raped. He printed off the emails and kept digging. He checked her browser history and found that she had visited several sites similar to the one she contacted. Looking at the site she reached out to, he saw several sample videos where other men, presumably husbands, had been tied down and forced to watch their wives with several men, all the while putting them down. He instantly recognized the men in the videos: T-Bone, CJ, AJ, Jake, RJ, Bull, and the other two men whose names he never heard mentioned. What shocked him even more was that the videos on the site were available to anyone who paid a premium fee. John wasn't stupid. He had seen online adult videos before and knew there had to be a release form filled out giving site owners permission to publish the videos. He was never given that opportunity and wondered if the other men had signed such a form. He picked up his phone and called Detective Jones. "Jones," the detective said when he answered. "Detective, this is John Hurley. I have some information here you may find interesting. Can you come to my house?" "Sure. Let me finish what I'm doing and I'll be right over." "Thanks," John said before ending the call. As he waited for Jones, he performed a Hoy's search to see if he could tell who owned the site. The registration was done in a way to keep the owner's name private, but he knew that a law enforcement agency could subpoena the record. He also knew which company hosted the site. He printed that out for Jones. About a half hour later, Jones rang the doorbell. "Thanks for coming, Detective," John said, opening the door. "You have something for me?" "Yes, in my computer room." Jones followed him upstairs and looked over the printouts John gave him. "That corroborates what we found at the house. From what we saw, they've done this to a number of men." "What about release forms?" John asked. We found release forms signed by the wives. Even your wife signed a release form. We're still going through everything, though." "So she knew this was going on the internet?" John asked. "Looks that way," Jones said. "But what about the husbands?" John asked. "I don't recall seeing anything like that, but like I said, we're still going through all the evidence. Look, I'm going to have to confiscate your wife's computer for evidence." "Go ahead. I'd like to keep these printouts for my attorney, though. The files are still there in her email." Jones nodded his head after giving it a bit of thought. "Sure, but don't destroy them," he said. After Jones left with Donna's computer, John sat at his machine and had a brainstorm. He began searching some of the adult video sites and found several fairly lengthy videos produced by the site. He scanned through them and saw that in each one, the husband was treated much as he was, while the wife took on all of the other men, except for RJ. He looked back through the email thread he printed from Donna's computer and read it carefully. There it was, in black and white. "Just so you know," T-Bone wrote, "we usually end the session with some intimacy involving the husband. Are you okay with that?" "Oh, definitely," Donna wrote back. "How far does it go?" "As far as you want, so long as your husband agrees to it," T-Bone said. "I'd like to see him destroyed in the back," Donna wrote. "Can you do that?" "Sure, but he has to agree." "Don't worry about that. I'll make him agree." The cheating woman, John thought. He felt his blood pressure begin to rise and stepped back from the computer, taking deep breaths. Unfortunately, that wasn't working, so he took another pill and went downstairs. He couldn't stand to be exposed to any more of this. The next day, he went to see Jenny about a divorce. He made a copy of Donna's emails and took them with him. One copy would be for Jenny, and the other he would present to Donna's parents. He arrived at the office a few minutes early and was escorted right in. After the introductions, he explained his situation to Jenny and showed her the email thread between Donna and T-Bone. Jenny listened without interruption, making notes as he spoke. She read the email thread and shook her head. "You know, I thought I had seen it all. Fortunately for you, this state allows for divorce on the grounds of adultery, cruelty, and abuse. I think this covers all three of those situations. You say she was arrested and is being held without bail?" "Yes," John said. Jenny turned to her computer and nodded her head a few moments later. "I see here that she was arraigned yesterday and was slapped with a whole slew of charges: spousal abuse, sexual assault, conspiracy to commit rape, fraud, and illegal imprisonment for starters. Apparently, the judge felt she was dangerous enough to keep in custody. It also looks like her accomplices are also being held on multiple charges, very much like hers. And you say these men operate a website that posts this trash to the internet for money?" "Yes. I found a few of their videos and they're all pretty much the same thing." "Did they explain this to you before they tied you down?" Jenny asked. "No," John said. "Did they have you sign a release form?" she asked. "Again, no. They made it sound like it was some kind of an anniversary party or surprise. They never said anything about the intimacy or selling videos on the internet." "Well, I think we not only have a solid case against your wife, but we have a case against the men who did this to you as well as the hosting provider," she said. As John watched, Jenny did a few more things on her computer before saying anything further. "Do you know if they offered your wife any royalties for this video?" she asked. "No, I haven't seen anything like that," John said. "It looks like that website gets a lot of traffic. I'll bet they make a ton of money off this filth. Okay, here's what I'd like to do. I'll write up the divorce papers asking for 90% of everything. On top of that, we'll ask for the house and everything we can get our hands on. The judge may not go along with that, and it's possible we'll have to negotiate our way down." "That's just a starting point. We'll use this email thread and the fact that she's being held without bail as leverage. If they do release her, I'll get a restraining order against her and her accomplices, but I don't think you have much to worry about there. You say Detective Jones has the video they made as evidence and it never got to the internet?" she asked. "He has the video. As far as I know, it never got to the internet." But it would have gotten to the web, she said. Oh yes, he told her. She nodded her head. Okay, I'll get with him about that video. We'll have her served, and if you want, I'll file a civil claim against the website owners and the hosting provider. Yes, that would be good, John said. She looked at him before continuing. Do yourself a favor. Don't visit your wife. Stay as far away from her as possible. Don't even think about what she did. Let me and the authorities deal with it. From what you told me, you'd be better off not even thinking about her. If you want, I can set you up with a therapist to help you deal with this. Would that be all right? John nodded his head. Yeah, I've tried everything I know, but it just doesn't seem to be enough. Normally, the breathing and the medication keep me under control, but I've never had to deal with anything like this. I understand, Jenny said. She handed him a card. I'll give her a call right now if you want. Please, John said. She picked up her phone, called, and made an appointment for him. When she finished, she smiled and looked at John. Dr. Sykes said she can see you this afternoon at 4 p.m. Will that work for you? John looked at his watch, then nodded his head. That'll work. Thanks, John said. Good. Here's some things you need to take care of right away, she added, handing him a sheet of paper with a list of things he needed to get done. Most of it involved the bank, so he decided to take care of that after his appointment with Jenny. I'll take care of this right away, he said. Terrific. Listen, I know this has been rough on you, so I want you to rest, relax, and let us take care of things, you understand? I do, he said. Good. Don't worry, John. This will all work out, and you can move ahead with your life. He thanked her and left after leaving a healthy retainer. From there, he went to the bank, paid and closed out their joint credit cards, and withdrew everything but 10%, then opened a new account in his name only and applied for a new credit card. From there, he stopped at Donna's parents' house and explained to them what happened, showing them the email chain between Donna and T-Bone. They were shocked when he told them what he knew. This is sick, Donna's mother, Marcia, said. I can't believe she'd actually do something like this. Are you sure you didn't cheat on her? Marcia, I loved Donna with all my heart, and I never even thought about cheating on her. She saw a picture of me having dinner with my baby sister and thought we were having an affair. She didn't even bother to read the report. If she had, this probably wouldn't have happened. She shook her head. I don't know what to tell you, John. I'm truly sorry this happened to you. Me too, John said. Just do me a favor and stay in touch, okay? She asked. We've always thought of you as the son we never had. I'll do that, Marcia. By the way, her car is still at that guy's place. I'll give you her keys if you want to go pick it up. I'll bring her stuff by later today or this weekend sometime. Okay, thanks, she said. He handed her the keys and gave her the address. By then, he had just enough time to get to his appointment with Dr. Sykes. Dr. Sykes, Rhonda to her friends and patients, listened to John's story and said nothing until he was finished. I've heard about your condition, but I've never met anyone who was actually diagnosed with it. And you say you've been using martial arts training to help keep it under control? Yes, John said. Breathing exercises mostly. That, along with medication to help my blood pressure. It usually works pretty quick, and until recently I've hardly had to use it at all. Are you still taking martial arts training? She asked. Yes, John said. Maybe we should take a look at some exercises in meditation. Would you be open to that? I would, John said. Good. We've got a lot of work to do, John, but I think we can help you through this without any more medication. I would prefer that, John said. He left and went back home, where he bagged up Donna's things, including all their wedding photos and her wedding dress. He looked around and boxed up some trinkets she had collected over the years. They meant nothing to him now, and he wanted nothing in the house that would remind him of her. That weekend, he changed the locks on the house, took Donna's things to her parents, and did his usual weekend yard work. On Sunday, he found an app that said it would help calm him, so he downloaded it to his phone and listened to the sound of rain as he went through a regimen of breathing exercises. After a half hour of that, he felt like his old self and decided to go to work the next day. Things were quiet for John over the next few weeks. He went to work, went home, watched television, relaxed, and went to bed. The place seemed much quieter without Donna, and he enjoyed being able to do what he wanted without her constant accusations. The therapy sessions with Rhonda helped quite a bit, and he found the relaxation techniques she suggested helped a lot. He stayed in touch with Jenny, who said she was going to wait until after Donna's trial to have her served. Her thinking was that the divorce would go smoother if she was a convicted felon. The day of Donna's trial came around, and he was asked to testify, which he was more than happy to do. The jury was shocked when the DA presented his evidence, which included John's testimony. They were so shocked that they came back with guilty verdicts on all charges in just a couple of hours. The judge had no sympathy for her either, sentencing her to the maximum possible under state law, 20 years. She would be eligible for parole in 15 years, the judge said. As she was being led out, a process server stepped forward. He verified her identity and handed her a manila envelope. "You've been served," he said. Defeated, Donna signed the papers and handed them back. "Have a good day," the server said as he accepted them. She looked at John with tears in her eyes, but he simply looked away. The deputies escorted her out and took her to the van that would transport her to the state women's prison. A couple months later, John learned from Jenny that Donna had gotten pregnant, but had suffered a miscarriage. Too bad, John thought to himself. The trials against T-Bone and his crew took quite a bit longer. Detective Jones found a treasure trove of evidence that suggested they had victimized up to 15 men over the last 13 months. They found what appeared to be releases signed by the husbands they had targeted, but the men they had tracked down said the releases were signed after the fact and under duress. Making matters worse, the site owners had also posted personal information about the men they targeted. At least 3 of the victims had committed suicide as a result of what was done to them. By the time it was all said and done, all of the men involved were sentenced to 25 years hard labor, the site was torn down, and all of the victims, or at least all of the men Jenny's team of attorneys could locate, received a huge sum of money, which bankrupted T-Bone and his associates. The hosting provider settled with the men, which added to the pot. John nearly broke down crying when Jenny presented him with a $2 million check. While he appreciated the restitution, the money did very little to soothe his broken heart. "You're a good man, John Hurley. There are lots of good women out there who would love to be with you. You'll find her." "Thanks, Jenny. Maybe one day," he replied. John continued seeing his therapist, who helped him deal with his issues. Over the next 2 years, he buried himself in his work and dated periodically, but it was only been in the last couple of months that he dated the same woman more than once. "He's got a lot of issues to deal with," his therapist wrote as she transcribed her notes. "But on the upside, he hasn't had any more episodes and seems to be moving forward. I think he'll do just fine in the long run." "At least I hope so," Rhonda thought. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.